Gina Su, hello.
Hello, Jennifer Apple.
It's so great to have you in this space. For anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
Oh, today. Oh, I love that. Today, well, I feel like I'm always an actor, filmmaker,
Mhm.
and today I feel like a healer.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Anything bringing that up for you?
I've had some friends who are going through some stuff, and just being there for them for it has been nice and super healing for me too. So, like, when
Mhm.
you heal other people, you kind of heal yourself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful people are open
Yeah.
to having me be there for hard stuff.
How do you know that you have the capacity for that?
I used to be a life coach,
Mhm.
so I did it for a living.
Mhm.
Um, but also, I have so much empathy that I just feel like, I don't know, it should be shared and given around and tossed back and forth. And that's like that equilibrium of having it spread everywhere is the best the world can be.
Mm.
Like, I feel like the world is in a better place if we're all just kind of open and vulnerable with each other and
Oh, yeah.
just ask for help and cry for help.
Yeah. Do you feel like it depletes you, though, or do you feel like it fills you? Or I guess it's circumstantial.
So when I was coaching for a time, there it got to a point where I was like, "This is a little too much,"
Mhm.
which is why I moved to the creative path a lot more, did a full transition. But yeah, it was at times it was, but most I'd say 80% of the time, it was totally fulfilling.
I love that. I feel like that's the hard part or the balance that I've been trying to navigate as also a very, very, very deeply empathetic person, for
Yeah.
better or for worse. That I feel like has maybe that muscle has either I've held on less to it and I'm embracing the fact that it's something that's there and I let it come through more, or the world's I've become less hard because the world is so hard and therefore I just feel the empathy more. I don't know the chicken or the egg on it, but either way, I
Yeah.
feel like the balance of recognizing one's deep empathy and then the privilege of having that to then give to other people versus when does that giving of your empathy actually somehow take away from caring for your like the self-care for yourself of it. Like I definitely go back and forth about understanding that more. So I think it's interesting that it fills you mostly.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a very fine line, and
Yeah.
all of us, like, that line falls in a different place. But I do think as actors and as artists, like, our work is sharing empathy, is captivating as another character and sharing that. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's really intense, and we have to figure out, like,
Yeah.
where that ends for us in a work actor life and then where it begins in, like, a personal life.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think over time, if you can, like, find that line and draw it and know when you're getting close,
For
I
sure.
think that's so helpful.
For sure. It's been a practice and it's definitely one that
Yeah.
I haven't mastered in any way, but I'm definitely aware of the practicing of it and when I have the capacity and when I don't. And arguably, when I'm giving in to the capacity for it, I am coming fully with myself versus like giving in because I have it and feel like I should. And therefore I'm actually not meeting the needs of what the empathy actually are trying to serve in that moment. We're getting philosophical here, which is my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah,
kind of
I
talk.
love it.
Well, I'm curious what made you decide to become a life coach, what that actually entails, and then like what that work was. And then I kind of want to marry it in accordance to what we've been actually talking about, because I do think that there's something really ripe in what we were just discussing.
Totally. I worked at a normal PR desk job,
Mhm.
felt super unfulfilled, and I'm like, "What is my life purpose? I feel so lost." And I was super into fitness at the time, so I jumped over to a fitness startup, and it was like, "Yay, I'm doing a job I like in an industry I like," but I was still unfulfilled. I
Yeah.
worked in sales, it was a startup, I did everything, and I'm like, "What is this?" I had this, like, deep, intense search for purpose and for meaning. I was so lost, I hired a life coach that I met through a Tony Robbins seminar, and she's been my life coach for the past, I think, 7 or 8 years now. And just working with her, just like most people have an experience with a therapist, you just feel like so open, someone's listening to you, guiding you in the right direction, that I was like, she's doing what I want to do, which is help other people find meaning and purpose and fulfillment. And so I started taking lessons. I got my coaching certificate. I studied positive psychology outside my work hours. And then I loved it so much that I just quit that job and then became a life coach on my own.
What exactly is positive psychology?
Okay, I love this description. So the old version, what we know as the original version of psychology is studying people basically in misery, is diagnosing mental illnesses, and if you think of it on a scale, it's people from 0 to -10. You know, it's people who are struggling, have anxiety, depression, or working through some past trauma. You know, we kind of understand that version of psychology. Martin Seligman, who's the co-founder of positive psychology, founded this in within the last 100 years, which is studying people from the scale of 0 to 10,
Mhm.
which is people who are enjoying life, finding a lot of joy. The people on this scale have higher rates of good positive relationships, less divorce, more feelings of joy, uh, mark themselves as higher rates of fulfillment at the end of their life, and they call it the science of flourishing. So positive psychology studies like the habits and the things we can do to like bring people on this side of the scale, which I find to be super cool.
Amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that as a framework to think about the ways in which we can incorporate more joy. I think that's something that I'm always trying to strive for, especially in a
Mhm.
darker world. How can we bring
Yeah.
even little, pockets of joy more into our lives? And, I think it's safe to say that so many of us sometimes fall below the zero for,
Yeah.
many, many reasons, consistently or inconsistently, for diagnosed or undiagnosed reasons.
Yep.
And, if we're trying to think of quote unquote zero being quote unquote neutral, like, which it isn't, but what is neutral? But if we're trying to
Yeah.
think of that as like the baseline, so many of us already have to like bring ourselves back to the neutral in order to continue going into the positive. And that oscillation between those things is living, I would call it. But
Yes,
to have the
totally.
tool set to think more, and I don't like the word positive necessarily, but to think more,
Yeah.
if we're thinking numbers, I'll do it from that perspective, and the positives rather than the negatives. Like if we're thinking numerically positives, I think that is wonderful to think more about the tools that one can have to pin the numbers higher in that way. I'm
Yeah.
curious if there were things that you did in the life coaching that were kind of like a standard set of toolbox things that you shared with clients around bringing more of that joy and positivity as we're talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you for phrasing it that way. I think you did it perfectly. Like
Yeah.
life, we're all over on that scale, but just having the science of the tools that help bring us higher rather than what to diagnose us and keep us in a
Yeah.
lower state is the cool and juicy part of positive psychology. My favorite toolbox item is a super short, simple phrase. Um, Progress equals happiness. So, no matter where you are in your life, as long as you're learning and growing, and that includes making mistakes and taking 2 steps back before you take 3 steps forward, you are finding joy in the journey rather than the results, which is also something very hard about being an artist.
Yeah.
So always remembering that, that sometimes when shit gets really hard, you're like, wait, but when it's hard, I'm growing, and growing
Mm.
is good. Because
Yeah.
if you're not growing, you're dying. So,
Yeah. And the phrasing of you saying that though, like definitely hit me in a way that maybe other people feel, where like when I think about progress, I think about goal, like a goal that I'm trying to reach. And that makes me mad because
oh
I'm
yes,
thinking about progress as something attainable rather than something that I'm navigating.
yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying? Where it's like if I'm simply just like living my life and I'm accepting that it's messy or that I'm learning as I go, there isn't necessarily the label on it of like of clocking progression, which feels
hmm
somehow marked by goalposts. I'm curious how you maybe define progress in a different way, or maybe you want to challenge me on that.
yeah. It's kind of twofold in that I imagine it's kind of like an amoeba. It's
Okay.
it's it's kind of formless, and it's a personal compass of knowing, I think I'm better this year at, for example, handling grief than I was last year,
Mhm.
or better this year at rejection than I was last year, or I have more tool sets to calm myself down, be stressed for 2 hours rather than 2 days.
Mhm.
So I still think having measurements is really important because that's how you measure progress, is that
Yeah.
you have milestones that show you that you've changed. The other cool thing is it doesn't have to be in the same markers. Like for me, there was a long time where my progress was becoming a better actor, being in class, getting my improv skills, improved. But then progress when I hit a wall or that on that point or plateaued, I also found progress in my fitness or in health or in my relationships, or my personal life outside of acting. And any of those can check your progress box, which
Mhm.
I think is delightful. There's If we look at it from that point of view, there's 100 ways to win.
How do you think of it less comparatively? Like, I hear, the word, and I'm sorry if I'm challenging you, but I guess this
No,
is
do it.
yeah. Like, I hear the word better, and I think if I think of the word better, it's like better than something. Or if I think about winning, it's, like there's a losing. Or if I think about, you
Mm,
know, I, I guess I'm curious about how we can make progress without the comparison, how we can sit in movement. I guess I'd rather, like, maybe in my brain as I'm talking it out, like, I feel like movement somehow feels less mile marked than
yeah.
progress. I think the thing that I'm getting caught on with it is not that progress isn't, like, us growing and morphing and becoming, fuller human beings is ultimately, I would say, also the goal. I think we're in agreement with, like, the
Yes.
outcome of this. Like, I think we're
Yeah.
fully in agreement. I'm
The
getting nitty-gritty
journey.
about the semantics because I find that so many of us artists, and I guess I can speak for myself, a lot of the ways I get stuck are because of the self-imposed or industry imposed standards that are placed on me or that I put
Mm,
on myself of, like, well, by this point you should have X, which again, who's telling me the should? I don't know, but you
yeah,
should
yeah.
have done this. And therefore there's this mile marker of what success is or what progress is. Until I've done that thing,
Oh.
I'm not actually making micro movements. And so
Oh, I
starting
see.
for so many people, like, the starting of the thing is actually the hardest part because it requires some sort of movement. And if it's not in, you know, conversation with these shoulds or, like, it needing to be a certain way, then how the gauging of it, I think, becomes the question. Is
Yes.
that is that clearer what I'm
Yes.
asking? Yeah,
Yeah, totally. So I guess I'll push back to what you said
please.
earlier, which is I think you need to have measurements and milestones, and you do need to compare, and you do need to know that you are better now than before at something. But I think the definition of what better and comparison is where it depends
Mm,
on the type of person. So when you said, for example, like for any actor out there, maybe like by 30, they wanted to be in a feature film that's in theaters. Like
mhm.
that is a good dream goal, intention to have, but that should not be tied to progress equals happiness.
Talk more about that. I love this. Tell
Yeah.
me more. So
Yeah.
how do you separate that then?
So progress is not I'm so glad you're bringing this up. This is so great. It's not so goal oriented, like every year you write out your goals if you do
Mhm,
that and then you're like, "Oh, am I getting closer to that?" That's one form of it. Another form of it is just the progress of human living, which
mhm,
is growing, making mistakes, having heartbreaks, having an awesome emotional connection with someone, falling flat on your face, um, kind of the progress of, like, becoming more wise, which
mm,
doesn't mean that you become more famous, more rich, more better than the people around you.
mhm.
You're It's the progress of knowing yourself more and getting better at being more yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
That I
that's
can get on board for. That for
yeah.
me feels more in alignment. I
Yeah.
think, again, words hold so much meaning and they hold meaning differently for each of us. And, maybe this is like my life plight, but, like, I think if we were to put, 10 people in a room, all of whom surface based seem to be on different spectrums of a topic and seem to
Yeah,
perhaps be at odds with each other. I'm willing to mostly die on this as like something I deeply believe that actually all maybe like I'll say 8 of the 10 are actually probably all in agreement about the same thing. They're just talking about it differently. Like
agree.
I and it's really the way that we talk about it or the angle that we understand something or the intersectionality of our identities that make us come from a certain perspective of it. But like ultimately
Yeah.
actually people really want the same thing. We just don't know how to A, express it, B, communicate it, C, understand others, or D, listen. Like I
Yes.
really, I will die on that as like, so, like a tenant of my identity. And so for me, I am interested in unpacking the verbiage because for you, progress we're saying the same thing that like
Yep.
movements, time, growth, purposeful showing up and being messy and being willing to fall on your face, all of that for you is defined as progress. And for me, maybe I use the word movement, but like ultimately we are saying the same thing that moving forward in some sort of way, whether it's intentional or unintentionally, will naturally bring more joy, hopefully.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's why there's so many people that we can learn from, like certain people attached to different speakers or
Yeah.
different scientists who talk about the same thing just in a different way because we're all different and we kind of need to consume it the way
Yeah.
that works for us.
Yeah, or like how many times have you heard the same thing from different professors growing up or different teachers and all of a sudden like
Yeah.
one teacher says the same thing but like in a different way and you're like, "Oh, I've never learned this before." And you're like, "No, actually I've
Yes.
literally the amount of times that I've taught master classes for universities and I've said something that is not profound, but all of a sudden students are like, "Oh my god, I've never understood it." And literally the teacher who brought me in was like, "I said this to you 4 days ago in this workshop that we did." And they're like, "No, you didn't." It's like,
Oh,
"No,
I
you
I
didn't."
love that.
Oh, you never said it to me like that. And it's like, okay, well, this is why now this person's in here for you to hear the information in a different
Yeah.
way and have it land on you the time that you needed it, in the way that you needed it, in the verbiage that you needed it, the emotional capacity that you needed, all of the things. So I'm glad that we unpacked that. Thank you for going down
Yeah,
that
thank you for
that
going
with
there
me.
too.
I know that you had mentioned we had kikied off of here about ways to like design this lifestyle so that
Mhm.
you can feel more fulfilled, that you can create a life that you are striving towards these goals or joy, or it could be an adjective that you want more of in your life. I'm curious if you can kind of walk us through that as an exercise, but also more like where it comes from and what it has done, and if you do it for yourself and what those are and how it works and all of that.
Yes, for sure. So this is one of my favorite exercises, and I would do this with every single client that would come
Mhm.
into my office, my virtual office, which is core values. And that is 3 words that you choose out of a list of whatever, a
Is this like
thousand
Brene
you could
Brown's list, kind of like going to her list? Do you know what I'm
kind
talking about?
of, I don't
Okay.
know if it's the exact same one. This
Okay.
is more rooted in what Tony Robbins has done before and what
Okay.
my coach did with me. It's probably very similar.
Yeah.
Um, so you find 3 words that are your core values and they change over time. So from one year to another or 6 months to another, they can change. And I usually say that if you already have this in your life, it's kind of not one of your core values. It's something that you're a little bit like striving to have more of. So some examples are boldness, respect, creativity, family, adventure, ease, calmness, excitement.
Mhm.
They're these like nouns that describe different feelings or goals you have in life. And
Mhm.
so there's this long exercise, but if you want the short version, you could literally go through all the lists and just like pick 3 that you just vibe with.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and with those goals, it helps you to make decisions on how you feel and how you want to act. Because I think a lot of times life is hard because we have so many decisions to make.
Yeah.
And how do I move forward in this? How should I act when I go to this thing? Which job should I take? It's just so many decisions from morning till night, and your core values act as your compass. So, for example, my brother, family is his core value. He has 2
Mhm.
kids. He's wants to be the best dad possible. That's his. Unfortunately, family's not in mine currently. Mine right now is GTE, which is growth, tribe, and enjoyment. And
Mm.
before I had like it was very intense. It was like winning or something super
Mm.
intense. And now I've replaced that with enjoyment. And so now that I have this, for example, if growth is mine and someone else has, let's say, stability as their core values, we
Mhm.
would make different decisions. I'd
Mhm.
make probably a riskier decision. Maybe when it comes to finances, that person finds a job that's more stable. I become an actor. um, and and that's how you use those core values in short.
I love that. So this does really remind me of Brene Brown's. She has a list of values, and her whole thing is that, like, when we talk, we're like clear about what we believe and hold important. So
Hmm.
if you know what your values are, um, it's helpful for you in the work that you do to then see if the work is in alignment with the values that you're doing. And she has a whole, list of, things from like belonging, humility. I'm just like picking a bunch of them:
Yep.
courage, uniqueness, making a difference, self respect, balance, like whatever those
Yes.
are, very similarly, where you have them. For her, I don't think it's a limit of the three, but I do think she wants you to pick a couple and see what it feels like to make decisions from that. I think it's very helpful. It's also like, I think, like, start with why. People are like, well, what is your
Yeah.
why? Why do you do it? I feel like these are all similar versions of the same thing, like find the one that works for you of it. But there really is something to be said about if you know what makes you feel in alignment, it does help with the
Exactly.
decision making. And I forget where I learned this, and it's probably like some old wives' tale, but like we are only able to make, I don't want to say like literally making up numbers. This is not real. Do not fact check me.
Okay.
Like 3,000 decisions a day before like our brain starts to tap out, which is why people say, and that was a totally random number. It could be like 400 and it could be 70 million. I don't know. But,
Okay.
let's say it's 3,000. And that's why people say like, pick your clothing out the night before so that you don't have to make that decision in the morning, and it's like things are already done. You make your make your food the day before, so you don't have to make that decision in the morning, because it's another decision that would
Yes.
quote unquote deplete from the way in which you were able to like make other decisions.
Yes.
I think about that a lot. And when you're at a decision capacity where you're like, I don't even know anymore what I want or don't want because I've made so many. I love being able to go back to get your values or these three guiding posts that feel in alignment and be like, all right, well, let me just cross check where we're at with these and how does it feel temperature wise in terms of where it sits in my feelings. I love that.
It's got so much more ease in finding your fulfillment
Yeah.
when you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
When I coach a lot of younger people who are coming out of college straight into the workforce, finding fulfillment and purpose was like their main thing. It's like which job
Mm,
is going to make me the happiest, and they would always want the answer right away. But sometimes you don't know until you've done a couple of jobs, until you
yeah.
know what the work life is like. And so I think as we're older, for people out of college and kind of doing the life thing,
Yeah.
adulting, um, you've gotten some more of those lessons already, but with core values, you kind of set little like micro structures for yourself to keep looking for those things.
I love
And
it.
then the more you're looking for it, you're finding progress.
Do you When you're making decisions, do they have to meet all three of them, or does it need to meet one of the bucket, or do you try to make them meet two?
Oh, I've never thought about it that way. Sometimes it is only related to one.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I think about this is totally separate but kind of similar, where I think about career jobs for me at this point in my life. I have
Yeah.
a three pillar that I go off of. One is career fulfillment, which is, will this progress my career? As in, are the people in this room people that I've been wanting to work with? Or is this studio, one that would be really great to have on my resume? Or is this, role one that will be really, really helpful in getting me into other rooms? So the career part of it. I have the
Yeah.
financial part of it, which is this paying me well? Is this paying my bills? Is this even paying
Y-
me at all? And then I
Yeah.
have the third one, which is like personal artistic fulfillment, as in, is this a story that speaks to my heart? Is this a role that I really want to delve into? Are these words that I want to come out of my mouth? Do I feel like this is going to really be impactful for me as a human being in an artistic space? And if a job does not fulfill two of the three, I don't do it.
I love that. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've shared that on the podcast
I
before, but
haven't.
that's
No.
incredible because that's in essence, those are your core values.
For my career,
And
at least. I mean, I
yeah,
obviously have feelings as to why I would pick something artistic or why this, financially could work or not, or why career-wise I think this is an important decision for sure. And those are probably in more of an alignment of, say, the Brene Brown value list of like, because this feels important for X, Y, and Z reasons, or, emotionally I connect with this and therefore I get to share this message. That, of course. But I think these are just a little bit more strategic, maybe.
yeah, yeah. And it's such an amazing example because you've created less decisions for yourself or less hardship in making those decisions.
Yeah.
Because, like a job comes in, it's with an amazing director, but it's not paid. Then you take that situation to your list, your thought
Yeah.
process. Compare those with each other, beep boop, analyzed, and then it's easier for you to figure out
Yeah. It's not always
which,
easy. I
yeah,
mean, think about you probably had a similar situation where you're like, "Oh my god, this is an amazing opportunity. They actually are paying me no money whatsoever. Will I be fulfilled doing this? But I will be with incredible people." And the
yeah,
weighing of that is hard, where sometimes it's like, "Okay, this pays me so much money and I feel like I'm selling out my soul. Is that worth it?" Or, again, there's no right or wrong. It's really a personal decision. But yeah,
yeah,
having that as like a checks and balances moment for myself allows me to at least analyze it in as much as of an objective way versus like the feelings that are coming up with like, oh, but which will of
yeah,
course happen for all of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do wanna share a recent new kind of tool thing that
Yeah.
I picked up was that we don't know about decision makings. You're trying to choose between A or B, and you do a pro and con list, you do all this stuff, which I encourage and I do myself, but I forget who it was, but she just said, it doesn't matter which one you pick,
Yeah.
actually, at the end of the day. Because if you pick one and it sucked, you realize next time you won't do it again,
Yeah.
which is lovely, amazing lesson learned. We love that. If you pick the right one and it went really well, then you're like, I'll keep picking this. And
Yeah.
life is just constantly that kind of two-way
Yeah.
prong funnel that keeps going back to the center as long as you adjust to what feels right to you. So for the people who are too bogged down by all this analytical stuff, just flip a coin. It kinda does the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and I really, and maybe this is, like, the only thing that makes me a relatively woo-woo person, which I don't consider myself really in any way, shape, or form, though I wish I were, is
Oh,
more
yeah.
like I really do believe that, like, what is meant for you will find you. I really do feel that, and sometimes you can't see it in the immediate, and sometimes you can't see it even in the future, and sometimes you can't see it until, like, 40 years later. I'm not that old, but, like, I imagine
Yeah.
there's things that I still don't understand why, and one day hopefully will, maybe I won't, but I really do believe that, like, if you are meant to do a thing or if a thing is meant for you, it will come back in some way, shape, or form, and you will be a part of it. You will be with those people in a room. You will have this kind of role at a different point. You will, meet this person in a different capacity when you're both ready to listen to one another. I really do feel like if we don't hold on so much to the what ifs, which is such a hard exercise, but if we try to be a little bit easier on the like, well, what if I did that? And allow ourselves to be more present, then we will actually get the fulfillment or the progress or the movement that we were discussing earlier about like how you're actually seeing growth in yourself. And
Mhm.
it's a hard exercise. I don't think anything that we're talking about right now is easy.
Yes,
Just
yeah, that's very true. I am 100% with you on that. I'm also a very woo-woo person.
okay.
So I that's something I live and die by is that whatever happens for you is meant for you and the universe is happening, like good things are happening for you, not
Mhm.
against you. The cool thing that I learned in positive psychology is optimism actually makes people happier, live longer, have less rates of divorce, have better cardiovascular health, and those people are typically like more healthy physiologically.
How do
So,
you create an optimistic mindset though if you tend to be more of a cynic or you tend to be more of a realist? Like how do you even bring yourself into something that is again in the, numerical positivity of the thing,
yeah, one thing they touch upon, which I love, is one of their main pillars is being in flow as much as possible,
which
which
means
so flow is a state of you it's typically something you're kind of good at. It's still a little bit challenging, and when you do it, time kinda goes out the window. So, I think in our world, actors who do a scene and they're like, "I blacked out." You
mhm.
that person was kind of in flow, or people who run marathons or play the piano, it's usually some hobby-related thing or even public speaking, like that puts people in flow. So it's got to be a perfect level of like challenge and focus, and then this
Okay.
like void of time, basically. And the more you're in flow, it means the more present you are. And being more present makes you less calculating about life.
Mhm.
And then when you have more optimism, you're having more moments of flow, which puts you in a state of feeling here for whatever's happening now, and not so much in the past and not so much in the future, which makes
Yeah.
people like overanalyze.
Yeah. That's such a hard thing.
What, to be in flow often?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm only talking about myself here. I definitely find myself in pockets of it, and I know when I'm in it, I can clock that. I think again, it's the because I feel like when I think about flow, you don't aim to flow, it kinda happens organically, like, you're just in,
Mm,
like, a zone in this maybe the different verbiage would be, like, in the zone for something, like, you're not
yeah,
like, "Oh, yeah, like, t right now, I'm gonna clock out in my calendar, I'm gonna be in the zone from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m." Like, it'd be like, "No, I'm gonna do this task," and you may end up in a flow, you may end up in a zone, but to get into the thing, I think is so hard because you can't think your way into it, it just has to happen, like
yeah. What are your activities that you find flow the most in?
oh, man, hiking for sure, anything out
Yeah.
hiking, skiing, so mountains generally for me, that would be, like, an easy I don't question it, I know what happens, I get into a headspace that's more clear, and I'm grooving, and I'm able to be really present with myself and my environment, and it feels fulfilling, it feels joyful, it fills my challenging, like, physical, needs that I strive for, so definitely those.
I think you answered it right there in the kinda earlier question you brought up about you have to think your way into it, but then you said, "When I'm on the mountain, it just happens."
Yeah.
And so if people can find what their mountain is or what their skiing is, then that's their moments of flow.
What if you have a lot of responsibilities that don't allow for you to find time, say, on said mountain?
Oh, so you don't have time to go to the mountain?
Or yeah, or like you don't
Then
have an opportunity to give yourself the playground where a flow happens.
I think you need to make it.
Yeah.
I think I'm I'm not a mother, but I have talked to a lot of mothers that have found so much of a better life in motherhood when they literally carve out time for themselves and, like, you know, other spouse is picking up the kids from 3 to 4, I'm going to yoga class,
Yeah.
and that is can be life-changing for someone.
Yeah.
And so it's making it a must for sure.
Yeah. I that's definitely a practice that I know I've been trying to be more diligent about, and I know a lot of my friends are as well, of recognizing that just because something is on the calendar as a responsibility doesn't mean that you can't add something to a calendar that is your responsibility, as in your, like, self-care responsibility. Like,
Yes.
just as much as you need to, like, make, a living and have your side thrival hustle and, prioritize your relationships, so too the relationship with yourself. And yeah, if you know that
Yeah.
a mountain is your happy place, then really putting that on the docket as though it were a commitment to yourself. I That also is hard, but necessary.
Yeah, and I'm so intense about that. I know
Okay.
we previously talked about, like, Google Calendar life.
Yeah.
My workouts are in there, when I eat is in there.
Yeah.
Me and my husband have a date night every Wednesday night that's planned in there, and if a acting workshop happens on that day, we discuss which other day we move it to, so it
Mm,
still happens one of the days in the week,
I love that.
and the reason why I've gotten more and more intense about this over time is because it's made me happier,
Yeah.
and so my moments of flow are in there, and
Yeah.
so if I go a day without it and I go back and look at my calendar before I go to bed, which is what I do at the end of each workday, I'm like, "Oh, no wonder I feel like shit."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I moved the date night, I moved the workout, I did all this other work stuff, and now I'm, like, depleted for tomorrow, and tomorrow's the same full packed day, so if I keep doing this, I know that a burnout is
Yeah.
inevitable, so then you
Yeah.
have to adjust. Yeah.
Yeah. I think reminding ourselves that in the small ways we have control of that, even just like the awareness of you at the end of the day being like, "Oh, that's why I feel the way that I do." Like that moment of awareness then again, with choice, like you then have the decision to like put in a workout tomorrow if you want it, or
Yeah,
saying, I can sustain one more day and know that that's a choice that you're making and it's neither better or worse. It's just you having that awareness allows you to then make that decision. And I
exactly.
think we forego those moments of clarity, gut check, awareness because we don't trust them or whatever the reason is, and we ignore them
Yeah,
and then we continue pushing through, and then burnout happens, and then we're no longer um living the lives that we wish that we were living because we got so caught up in the doing of the thing and not the listening to ourselves part of it all.
yeah,
um
exactly, and I think for woo-woo people, like, listening to your gut and your intuition is how they describe it, but for very practical people, it's just taking that feeling and describing it and, like, putting it in your calendar. So it's kind of similar, you know?
Yeah, I fall more into the latter of that, which is like, even the friends of mine now, they're like, "Let's hang out." I'm like, "If that thing isn't in the calendar, it's not happening. Not because I don't love you, not because I don't want to prioritize you. It's just it has to be there. It has to for
Yeah,
my own self, or I'm going to A, forget it. B, it's just going to be something that goes to the wayside, not because I want it to, but because just life will happen. And so I want to prioritize that, put it in my calendar. So I definitely get the latter.
yeah,
Both of us, we talked about this too, off of just, thinking of our lives as like seasons of our lives. Obviously you're in LA, it's less season filled really, but out here on the
yeah,
East Coast, it's a little bit more actually seasoned. Well, who
yeah.
knows, global warming. But with that aside, uh I'm curious how you, if there is anything that you do to commemorate, shift, move through the different seasons of your lives as they're happening, or if it's just like a retrospective, like, "Oh, wow, like, this is a thing, and now I'm in this new one."
There's so many. One is finding a baseline equilibrium that I can always come back to no matter where the season is. So if it's up and down like this, there's kind of a line in the middle that I am aware of that is where my base joy kind of lies, which does tie back into making sure I exercise, I see my friends that I like, family,
Mhm.
and is doing something that's giving me flow and growth. So when the ups get super intense, a lot of that may fall to the wayside because we're busy on a film set or whatever it is,
Mhm.
but to know that, like, it'll come back down and I'll have that baseline to go to. Other times, it can get super deep and dark, and I don't wanna do anything, I just wanna watch TV and eat a bunch of junk. That is also okay, that is part of life, it's a lovely process of life,
Yeah.
but that will also eventually come back, and I know where I am on that scale, so that I can always and everything's temporary, you
Y
know? So the ebbs and flows is part of it.
yeah. I love recognizing what your baseline is. Again, it's so interesting just hearing like, the way you talk about it, because it's like that baseline is the 0, but just now in a different part of your life,
Yeah.
like, which
Yeah.
again, and then there's, like, the positives and the negatives or whatever. I'm just thinking about it from the beginning. If anybody's been watching this on YouTube, you can, like, see that, like, we've been clocking hand motions this entire
Yes.
time of, like, below and, like, there's, like, this imaginary line that we're both clocking in the middle of each of our frames. Um, but I think it is, again, the self-awareness of like, all right, this is where I'm at when things are just in flow or things are just happening, and it's just the neutral state of my existence, and then being able to come back to that at any point. Um,
Mhm.
I love that. I think for me with seasons, there's always, or like, and they could be 2 years long, they could be 2 seconds long, they could be 4 months, of just like these seasons, these chapters of my life. I think there's usually something that marks it for me, where there's usually a moment that I'm like, "Oh, that would have felt differently at this time, and now it's
Mm.
feeling differently now." Or there was something that happened externally that the impact of that made me have to like pause. And then it's like, well, now how do I move forward? And these larger shifts that actually are not necessarily from within me, I think are the ways that I'm clock
Mm.
my seasons, which is interesting to hear because I feel like hearing you, it's like, oh no, no, you can feel where you are centered on that equilibrium. And for me, I think it's more like, oh wow, this rocked me in some way. And now I'm recognizing that my reaction to this is different. And that's growth. Or my
Oh,
response to
okay.
this is actually more positive than I thought it would be. Or, I have more patience with this than I ever did before, and recognizing in those moments as things are happening to me, I would say, I'm
Okay.
then able to be reflective around where I'm at and what's happened in my life in these different chapters. I guess
Mhm.
just offering up to whoever's listening that there is no right way for doing any of this, and there's
Yeah,
probably
none.
multiple other ways of these changes and shifts happening for people. Um, but I do think it's wonderful for at least, both you and myself, like naming
Mhm.
that all of us are navigating our own version of um, movement, progress, insert word here in our
Yeah.
lives, and to continue trying to cultivate as much curiosity around the ways in which we can incorporate more joy, positivity, optimism so that we can fall onto the numerical spectrum of positivity.
Yes.
That's a practice and it's hard, but if each of us decided to work just a little bit on it for ourselves, I mean, without being like all woo woo about it, like the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I really believe that. And I think as an artist, self-worth is such a weird place to be. Like
Yeah.
other people are selling products or software, we're selling ourself in many ways.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to separate that self-worth of like me as just like a normal human on this earth walking around
Yeah.
versus me as a product and clocking my progress in the career sense, which is why I think celebrating wins is a really important muscle to work on
Yeah.
because we need as much self-worth as we can get.
Yeah.
And artists typically are the people to have, be the worst to themselves about that,
Yeah.
on top of the industry that we work in. And so even small things I've adjusted over time. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll get myself a little treat. And I'm like, this is too
Yeah.
many treats. And
Yeah.
then sometimes I'm like, I'll buy myself a little thing. I'm like, oh, now I want to like live more minimally and be more sustainable. So sometimes it's just like for a while, I did this thing which it was like a little nose tap. You know how, like, you
Mhm.
like, boop a little dog or a little kid? And I was like, "Oh, I did an audition. I don't know if they liked it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll get it, but, like, I like, practiced it. I showed up. I felt good. I got myself in a good zone, and I did it, and I had fun." And, like, that I was like, "That's a win." Little,
Oh,
kinda,
cute.
like, physical tap to just be like, congrats. Okay,
Yeah.
now enjoy the rest of your day. And that's like game changing, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. We had in our first episode ever with Alicia Albright, it's an incredible episode. And she talks about, like, she does this like heart tap, basically like sending
Oh,
light. And she talks about it on
yeah.
the episode, and it's really impactful, just like how she sends, like little heart taps to other people before they enter rooms, after they enter rooms, in like before, like when they're not even with her in space, like just like sending these heart taps. And it sounds very similar that you're doing it to yourself, a little like nose tap. And I think that's wonderful. Like a tap on your back, a tap on your shoulder, like a little handshake, a little hug for yourself. I think I don't
Mhm.
do that. And it would behoove me to do that. I probably just go and snuggle my dog, which also gives me a different form of joy and love.
Yes.
Um, but I love that you've done that. And what it also does too is it's marking the conclusion of something, right? You're putting an ending to the thing without it being firm of like, I did this, here's an accomplishment, boop boop to my nose, and now the next moment happens. And it's kind of
Mhm.
like, and scene a little bit of
Yep.
of the whole entire situation that allows you to then continue moving on to said next scene. That I think is a really healthy practice to be able to also just like notate time of like, I did this. This was done. Next,
Yeah.
here's the next thing. Tap
And it
next.
allows you to stay present too. Because,
Correct.
we all know those moments of like, "Oh, I should have done this way. Oh, they were looking at their phone." Whatever it is, then you're hovering in the past
Yeah.
or and it's good sometimes to hover in the future too. Next time I will do this and that, and then I'll have better boobs by then, and then you leave it. So then you're always, trying to get back to present.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for going on this journey with me. Thank you for, riding the wave of my, philosophical brain
Absolutely.
here. And I just think it's really important for us to be naming a lot of the emotional things that a lot of us artists go through and how we can, help support ourselves and others with different, perspective shifts or tools to perhaps add a little bit more joy into all of our lives.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate you sharing and showing up in this way. with this
Yeah.
community.
And thank you so much for showing up as yourself. You're like, "I'm a realist, I'm not woo-woo, let's drive the conversation this way," and I'm like, "I'm here for it." So,
No, it's
it's
good,
so
it's good. I
nice.
think we showed 2 different perspectives of humanity, and that's exactly, there's many, many more to be seen. For anybody who wants to work with you, reach out to you, see the work that you're doing, what within your boundaries, are the best places for people to find you?
I am totally open to people reaching out to me on social media. So my main one is Instagram, which is at Miss Gina Su, MISSGINASU. And I have a broadcast channel on there where I post positive, happy things, health and wellness things. Sometimes it'll just be a good quote like, "You're doing amazing today."
I
So
love
if
it.
people want to join that, that's like a fun, it's called the happy hour little space community in there. And people are totally welcome to DM me. I love meeting up with other filmmakers and collaborators. It's my favorite thing to do. I love watching other people's shorts and projects.
Yeah,
So my DM is open for anyone to message me.
I love it. Thank you so much for being in this space.
Thank you. You're amazing.
So are you.